It's almost impossible to pick up a daily paper without reading about a person who has achieved some unusual accomplishment, and almost invariably these stories include the overcoming of what at one time appeared to be virtually insurmountable handicaps. A boy whose legs were terribly burned and who seemed destined to a life as a cripple becomes one of the world's outstanding track stars. A poor boy amasses a fortune. A woman, blind and deaf from birth, becomes one of the most inspirational personalities of all time. Every day, a new and dramatic story appears somewhere. Obstacles overcome. Outstanding success achieved. They're too numerous to mention. But how and why? These persons do far more than the unhandicapped to overcome obstacles that seem insurmountable and achieve the success they seek. Why? The answer, if fully understood, will bring you and me anything we really want, and it's deceptively simple. These people have goals. That is, they fix in their minds a point they have to reach, something that's more important than the effort and time that have to be expended in its achievement. A dream seen only in the mind and felt in the heart that's too big to be denied. A dream which rises before their eyes when they awaken in the morning and is the last thing they think about as they drop off to sleep at night. This dream, invisible to all the world except to the person who holds it, is responsible for perhaps every great advance of man. It's the prime cause of much of what we see in the world around us. Everything worthwhile achieved by man is a dream come true, a goal reached. It has been said, what the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve. It's the skyscraper, the bridge spanning the bay, landing on the moon. And it's the little corner business establishment. It's the lovely home in the suburbs. It's a youngster getting a diploma and the new baby in its mother's arms. It's a low golf handicap and a business position reached. What the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Do you know what this means to you and me? Well, let me try to explain, and I might add it took me many years to find this out for myself. Once it's understood, however, life becomes easier, more fun, far more exciting, and incalculably more rewarding. To begin, to understand this subject of goals, we have to realize that it's the very basis of any success. It is, in fact, the very definition of success. The best definition of success I've ever been able to find goes like this. Success is the progressive realization of a worthy goal. If you think about it a moment, you'll realize just how good that definition is. Success is the progressive realization of a worthy goal. It means that any person regularly engaged in achieving something which he considers worthy of him is successful. At the same time, it also means that any person not so engaged must be defined as not successful, a failure at least temporarily. Any person with a dream in his mind and heart which he is pursuing as a worthy goal is successful. The uninformed always seem to equate success with lots of money. While money often accompanies success, it has nothing to do with success necessarily unless it happens to be a part of the goal. It's left to each of us to decide for himself what his goal is. With such a simple definition of success, you'd think everyone would be successful. Everyone should be, everyone can be. But it's estimated that only about 5% are. Of all the people you pass on the street, only about 5 out of 100 can tell you what they're working toward. The rest are just drifting along, hoping something good will happen to them, or at least that nothing too bad will, letting circumstances and economic winds blow them this way and that. I like to compare human beings with ships, as Carlyle used to do. It's estimated that about 95% can be compared to ships without rudders. Subject to every shift of wind and tide, they're helplessly adrift. And while they fondly hope that they'll one day drift into a rich and successful port, you and I know that for every narrow harbor entrance, there are 1,000 miles of rocky coastline. The chances against their drifting into port are 1,000 to 1. But the 5% who have taken the time and exercised the discipline to decide on a destination and to chart a course, sail straight and far across the deep oceans of life, reaching one port after another and accomplishing more in just a few years than the rest accomplish in a lifetime. If you should visit a ship and ask the captain his next port of call, he'll answer you in one sentence. Even though the captain of a ship cannot see his destination for fully 99% of his journey, he knows what it is, where it is, and that barring an unforeseen and highly unlikely catastrophe, he'll reach it if he keeps doing certain things a certain way every day. Every person should do the same thing. Unless you can say in one concise sentence what your goal is, the chances are good that you've never clearly defined your goal. When you ask most people what it is they seek, they'll answer in vague, general, non-specific terms. They'll say happiness or health or money. These are not goals. They're simply general conditions desired by everyone. When we talk of goals, let's be specific. What is it you want, you as a person? What is it you would like very much to have or to be or to do, even though you may feel it's for one reason or another somewhat beyond your reach at the present time? You see, if you can tell me what you want, I can tell you how to get it, as long as it's worthy of you. Proceeding successfully through a lifetime should be a matter of progressively setting and achieving goals one after another, each a little better and perhaps more interesting than the preceding. Just as a ship can sail to only one port at a time, set your first port of call. When you reach it, and reach it you will, you can set a new goal, and then another. By following this meaningful and common-sense approach to life, you'll be successful and can accomplish more in 5 years than the great majority of people do in a lifetime. Now let me tell you of a way to clarify your thinking and establish your first goal if you don't already have one. Knowing that without a goal we're unsuccessful, but that with a goal we will have direction and purpose and that our goal will be reached, we begin to realize that establishing a clearly defined goal is one of the most important steps we can possibly take. If you do not know what it is you want more than anything else, in other words, if you're not one of the fortunate who knows exactly what it is he or she seeks, set some time aside right now. Spend an hour or so, or many hours, even days if necessary, writing down the things you would most like to have. Make a want list. This could include a more beautiful home, a new car, a wanted child, a certain amount of money, a better job, better grades, a particular position in your school or organization, any one of 100 things. Write down as many as you can think of. If you're married, it's a good idea to do this with your spouse. When you've written down all the things you want, all of them, choose one. Only one that you want more than all the others. Write this on a separate sheet or draw a circle around it. Now put the sheet away and forget about all the ideas except the one you've decided to accomplish first. Like a ship, a person can reach only one port at a time. Most of the confusion and indecision suffered by the majority of people is caused by their half-heartedly wanting so many things that they can't decide which to go after first. As a result, they run in circles and often accomplish little or nothing at all. Remember, as a rule, you can achieve only one goal at a time. Once you've decided upon the one goal you first intend to reach, write it out on a card to carry with you. Think about it the first thing in the morning and the last thing at night. Think about it as often during the day as you can. By doing this, you'll be forcing your goal into your subconscious mind, from which will come the answers as you need them for its accomplishment. This is the process used by the world's successful men and women. Think about your goal as often as you can. Get a mental image of it as having already been accomplished. But be sure to be absolutely specific. Don't generalize. If your goal is a certain amount of money, write down the exact amount and the time limit for earning it. If your goal is a beautiful home, get a picture of the exact home, even if you have to pay an architect to draw the plans for you. You might as well, because you will achieve it. But be very careful on what you set your mind and heart, for if you want it strongly enough, you'll get it. I spent more than 16 years looking for the so-called secret of success. I wanted to know what element or elements separate the haves from the have-nots, not just in a financial sense, although that's certainly an important part of living, but in every sense. I started looking for the answer in 1933 during the Depression, and I didn't find it until New Year's Day, 1950. All of a sudden I realized that in the hundreds of lives I'd studied, in the countless books I'd read, a plain and simple fact had been staring me in the face all along, and it is simply that we become what we think about. You see, you are at this moment nothing more than the sum total of your thoughts to this point. Similarly, you'll be next year, 5 years from now, and so on, what you think about from this point onward. That's why establishing a goal is vital to success. Unless we're thinking about the thing we wish to accomplish, our thinking is erratic, confused, jumping first from one thing to another, with the result that we accomplish nothing, arrive nowhere, travel in circles. By thinking every morning, every night, and as many times during the day as we can about the single goal we've established for ourselves, we actually begin moving toward it and bringing it toward us. When we concentrate our thinking, it's like taking a river that's twisting and turning and meandering all over the countryside and putting it into a straight, smooth channel. Now it has power, direction, economy, speed, It's the same with our minds. Once we know where we're going, we know why we get out of bed in the morning. We know why we're working, and why it's important to do the very best work of which we're capable. We know why it's vital that we cut ourselves away from the big, sluggish river of people who are drifting without purpose and cut the channel straight and clear to the number one dream in our heart. Some evening, during the rush hour, stand at a busy street corner and watch the passing crowd. Observe how they walk. Look at their faces. Do they seem interested, happy, purposeful, interesting? Or do they seem, for the most part, dull, uninterested, bored? If you watch long enough, you'll see a person with a quick and purposeful step, a good carriage and posture, with interesting, intelligent eyes, who walks as though he knows where he's going and who's going to insist on getting there. He's a man with a goal, a dream in his mind and heart. Several billion human beings on Earth would give anything they have for the freedom and personal liberty you and I take for granted, to have the right to choose their work and their goals, to enjoy our bountiful standard of living, to know the peace and privacy of our homes, and to have laws which protect the citizen rather than persecute him. We have it all, and yet in the midst of our plenty, millions lead unhappy, aimless lives, living from day to day, month to month, confused, dispirited, in a prison of their own manufacture. These are the people who have never made the decision that could set them free. They've not decided what to do with their lives, even in our climate of freedom. As Carlyle said, the man without a purpose is like a ship without a rudder. Have a purpose in life, and having it, throw such strength of mind and muscle into your work as God has given you. He also wrote, a man with a half volition goes backward and forward, and makes no way on the smoothest road. A man with a whole volition advances on the roughest, and will reach his purpose, if there be even a little wisdom in it. And Munger said, there is no road to success but through a clear, strong purpose. Nothing can take its place. A purpose underlies character, culture, position, attainment of every sort. So decide on your goal. Insist upon it. Look at your goal card every morning, every night, and as many times during the day as you can. Force your goal into your subconscious mind. See yourself as having attained it. Do this without fail every day, and it will become a habit that will lead you from one success to another all the days of your life. For this is the secret of success, the door to everything you will ever have or be. You are now, and you will become, what you think about.
All kinds of studies have been made with regard to factors which motivate people to live as they do. We've already covered enough ground in this program to establish the fact that people are responsible for their personal lives, barring some act of God or government, catastrophe or war that might intervene to change things, permanently or temporarily. For example, a lot of my friends, many of them very good friends of mine, were killed during World War II when they were in their 20s and 30s. The lives of others have been unalterably modified by injury or serious illness. But for most of us, we have our health, which is the natural inclination of all nature, and we have our lives to live. Sometimes, believe it or not, that's a personal handicap. It often takes the physically handicapped to demonstrate for us the unlimited possibilities that exist as an option for those willing to set goals and stay with them until they're achieved, while the healthy among us often take the path of least resistance. I think it was Bill Veeck, when he had the Chicago White Sox, who said, I don't want the natural athlete. I want a guy who'll go after the hard ones. It's the people in this world willing to go after the hard ones who achieve greatness. They're motivated. There's that word again. They're motivated to give the last ounce of themselves in the achievement of their goals. Now let's look at some facts of life. Only about 5% of the people achieve unusual success during their lives. These are the people who earn larger incomes, live in better neighborhoods, in better, larger homes, have better education, more of the good things of life, and make a correspondingly larger contribution to their communities. They tend to speak better English and send their kids to better schools. There are always exceptions to any rule, and there are many exceptions to this 5% group. I know a man who's head of one of the largest, best-known companies in the United States who can hardly put 10 words together in their proper order. If murdering the English language were a misdemeanor, he'd be on death row. Yet he has mansions, yachts, private jets, the works. Why, with no more than perhaps a 6th grade education and the apparent determination to assiduously avoid any improvement to it, has this man and his family enjoyed such spectacular financial success? Answer: he knows how to serve the people. His organization serves millions of people every day of the week. He's worked hard all of his life to build the great organization he heads, and he's done a fine job of it. So he can buy $3 million yachts and pay cash for them. And when he wants to go someplace in a hurry, there's his Gulfstream 3 warmed up and ready for him when his chauffeur takes him to the airport. But most people in that top 5% fit the earlier description. Many of them are not rich by the standards of our mega millionaire friend, but they're in the top 5% of American incomes. They're set for life, and they, as a group, tend to enjoy themselves very much. They play a better game of golf or tennis than most of the country's hackers, and they love their lifestyles. Now, a child is born in the United States. The odds, because of the statistics we've been talking about, are 95 to 5 that he will not be born into this top 5%. Like most children, he'll soon take his environment for granted. Let's assume he's a boy, although it works the same way for a girl. It will save my having to say he or she all the way through this interesting example. He grows up accepting his environment, his world, and his world is his environment as it is. Without giving it a single thought, his environment becomes a natural part of him. Everything about his environment is a conditioning factor. The speech of his parents and relatives and neighbors becomes his speech. What he learns in school will have very little effect on it. That's why you hear grown-up men and women who've gone through the American school system saying such things as ain't and where's it at. They didn't learn those locutions in school. They were the habitual pattern of speech they heard in their environment. I know an attorney who still says, where's it at? Anyone's speech habits are an immediate tip-off as to his upbringing. The only reason mine tend to be rather good is because from the time I was a small child I wanted to be a writer, and words were of great interest to me. Words are the tools of a writer's trade, and a good writer will have a decent inventory of them and tend to keep them well-oiled and shining. I was the only person in our family so affected. The rest had other interests, education not being one of them. If the statistics were reversed, it would be wonderful. If 95% of the people were successful to the degree the 5% are, the odds of a child being raised by the right group would be reversed. But that's not the case. So our typical young man or young woman grows up to mirror his or her environment. He thinks as they think. He takes that life for granted. All the people he loves are in that group. It's his group, too. And if he doesn't come across some unusual motivation along the way, he'll become an indistinguishable part of it. He does that because it's the perfectly natural thing to do. Their goals, or the lack of them, become his goals. A nice house on a nice street, a steady job of some kind, a good, steady income, a good wife and good kids, and so the story goes. He operates on minimums all the years of his life. He never, except while playing his sports or getting ready for a date as a young man, gets out of low gear. It isn't necessary in the United States. This country's so affluent, so vital, and so perennially booming that people don't have to shift into second or third gear in order to meet average requirements. And neither do most of the people throughout the world. Nor should they have to if they don't want to. His wife, while their children are small, is the hardest working human being in our society. She has no 8-hour day or 5-day-a-week system. She works 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, and according to a recent survey, if she had to do it all over again, she'd think twice about it. More than 50% of her number also hold down a regular paying job. She didn't know about the 5% either. No one ever said to this young man or this young woman, now look here, there are two very distinct groups of people in our society. They're in different layers of this socio-economic pyramid. And here, the parent or teacher would have sketched a pyramid. Now there's the top 5% who live and work in this top section here. And the person would have drawn a line into what represents the top 5% of the pyramid. Now here's what we call the great middle class in America. It's divided into two main groups. The upper middle class, another line would be drawn on the pyramid, and the lower middle class. The United States has the largest middle class of any country in the world. And then down here at the bottom, these few lower layers, these are the people who, because of 1,000 perfectly good reasons, need to be helped by all the rest of us. They have difficulty coping. Many of them are too old or sick to help themselves. We have some 25 million functional illiterates, and so on. So these young people would see very clearly their options. It would be made clear to them that they have the freedom, thank God and our forefathers, to choose. They have the option, if they so choose, to live and work on virtually any layer of that pyramid. And it should be pointed out to them that the higher up on that pyramid you climb, the better the view, the fresher the air, the smaller the crowd. Now that's important to know, but it takes more effort to climb higher on a pyramid. It's much easier to settle for these lower layers. You don't have to learn so much, and so on. Now, the parent or teacher might continue, we live right here at this level on the pyramid. And then the parent or teacher might say, it's not in the higher levels, but it's certainly not in the lower levels either. It's where I wanted to be. Your mother and I have been quite happy here. Well, I hope you get the picture. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we would be shown that when we're about 12 or 13? Wouldn't it be great to know we had that option and to see that pyramid? Well, this program is for the people who want to be in the top 5%, and it has a great deal of what we need to know to get into and stay in the top 5%. And while getting into the top 5% may be one's goal, it's good to remember that like any destination on planet Earth, there are a million ways to get there. Any road will do, any calling will do, if we go about it the right way. You can get rich hauling garbage, and many have already done so. It's a vital service to the community, but you have to go about it in a certain way. This young man, and now that we've brought his wife into the picture, this fine young woman, because of their past environment, their conditioning, come under the statistics of average Americans, because they live their lives in an average way. But of course they're not really average people. With the right motivation, they could become very uncommon people and do very uncommon things. They could render much greater service to their community and reap a much more abundant harvest as a result, if they knew what we're talking about in this program. Now, what are the odds that they will ever come across Dr. Brand Blanchard's advice about happiness? Do they know what happiness is and where it comes from? Has either of them ever truly explored his and her potential strong point? What is it that your original genetic pattern makes you especially qualified to do, young man and young woman? What do you most want to do? What brings you the greatest joy? Do you know your rewards all the years of your life will be determined by the extent of your contribution, your service to others? Do you know why some people are paid $20,000 a week, while others are paid the minimum wage? Bill Cosby earned $12 million in 1986. Do you know why? It's because of the people he serves. There's an investment banker in Los Angeles who earns about $40 million a year. Do you know that as far as is known, there's no limit on earnings? What would you like to earn? How about $1,000 a week? That's $52,000 a year, or twice that. That's not all there is to living by any means, far from it, but it does pay the bills, and if you earn an income in the upper 5% of the population, there you are, in that top 5% of the pyramid that the sun hits first as the earth does its daily rollover act, and the sun is still shining on it later in the day when the rest of the plain is dark. It's nice up there. And shooting for it will bring out the best that's in you. You'll do more for others. You'll make a greater contribution. You'll give more to charities. You'll help more people. So how about it? There's a talk I'd like to give to young people. Some would say I'd stir discontent among them, but I would reply that discontent is the greatest motivator of them all, and it's responsible for every great boon to humankind, from running water in the inside toilet to the supermarket. A little discontent is a good thing, especially when it's discontent with ourselves. The effect of environment is an incalculably powerful force. The deepest craving of young people is to be liked by their fellow students. Acceptance and esteem in the eyes of their contemporaries is their deepest craving. So they begin to do what the other kids are doing, and the other kids begin doing what they're doing, and everyone acts just like everyone else. They dress alike. They talk alike. They laugh at the same things, even when it isn't funny. It's at this critical age that they begin to play, not follow the leader. That'd be all right. The game they play is called follow the follower. Day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, these young, wonderful, impressionable people conform to one another. They never ask, Are the people to whom I'm conforming qualified to lead me? It's belonging that's important, belonging to the group. And that's the subtle trap that gets practically everybody. If we don't break out of that trap sooner or later, we'll end in it. Millions, no billions do. It's astonishing how many adults never break out. We see them in their 50s and 60s still playing to the wrong crowd, still trying to be one of the boys. Do you remember what Willie Loman said in Arthur Miller's great play, Death of a Salesman? He said, "The important thing is to be liked." Willie Loman never grew up. He never knew who he was. His story is a modern tragedy. It's always been a tragedy. It's the story of the mob. That's why so many young, healthy women are smoking today. It's their way of going counter to what they know is the intelligent thing to do. It's their small and very pitiful rebellion. When a person has no identity of his or her own, that person will seek to find that identity in a larger group. That's why joining groups of various kinds is so popular. In that way, we get a badge, a label that tells us what we are. Now we're properly labeled. This is not to say that successful men and women do not belong to organizations. They certainly do, and they make major contributions to their organizations. But they don't need the organization for identity. They're quite aware of who and what they are. And if their organizations did not exist, they would be successful, independent performers in society. They would never feel lost. Successful people follow independent paths. This is the important point to remember. At some point in their lives, they break away from the crowd and start on a path of their own. That's the adult, the intelligent thing for a human creature to do. In striking off on an independent path, they're not necessarily alone. It's just that they join a much smaller group of like-minded people. They can't take the whole crowd into that top 5%. The ancient Romans had their circus. Modern Americans have their television. It's far superior to the old Roman circus, and they don't even have to leave the comfort of their living rooms. It's true that there are many wonderful things on television, and an eclectic approach, that is, selecting those programs in which you're really interested, makes sense. But millions of families have the television sets on all day. They're mesmerized by it, and when one thinks of what they could be doing with some of that time, it makes one realize that it's much easier to win. One of the best things about getting in that top 5% is that as we get older, life need not become less interesting for us or more laborious. We become more productive as we approach our 60s and 70s and often many years beyond. And it's nice to grow older with all the goodies of life. It's more comfortable. One can spend one's winters in Florida or somewhere south of the equator and one's summers in the cooler, healthier climates. And one can enjoy all the benefits of the good life. But perhaps most importantly of all, one can say, I gave it my best, and I'm not through yet. It's been a wonderful experience, this holiday on Earth, and I've enjoyed it very, very much. Now let's see what we can do with the rest of it. Yes, I think it's actually easier to win. There's less competition up there where the view is so much better and the air is so fresh and clean. And it's almost never too late. For with a purpose, a worthy goal, and the motivation to reach those upper layers on the pyramid, a person can travel farther in a few years than he might otherwise travel in a lifetime. The degree of a person's ignorance will determine his or her place in the world. Everyone is born ignorant and must for a time live in ignorance. But remember this, anyone who remains ignorant has only himself or herself to blame. An illiterate person in our society is in the lowest level of our social heap, and from that starting point, think once again of society as that pyramid with a broad base gradually rising to a high point. We know that the great majority of people are to be found in the bottom large layers of this pyramid. The higher you go, the smaller the layers. At the very peak of the pyramid, you'll find the world's most brilliant people. We may not have the native equipment to reach the topmost pinnacle, perhaps, although we certainly might. But we do control where we will live between the very top and the very bottom. We can most assuredly get into the top 5%, let's say the top 5 layers of the pyramid. And from here we can live well and successfully all the days of our lives. It isn't that we want to be over anyone, it's just having the ambition and good sense to not settle for anything less, to want to live the best we can. Remember, the higher you climb on a pyramid, the farther you can see, the fresher the air, and the less crowded it becomes. Another rewarding thing about climbing is that as we climb, we help most of those associated with us to climb too. One of the most important ladders leading to the top is knowledge. The more we know, the higher we can move. But where does a person begin? No one person can know everything. In fact, our store of knowledge is growing far too fast for anyone to keep up with it. It's like walking into the Library of Congress with its millions of volumes and trying to decide which single book to read first, knowing that even if you lived 1,000 years, you couldn't read them all. Well, fortunately, the answer to this perplexing problem is known. A person should begin with the study of his language, and then to his general area of interest. 2 steps in that order that can move us right up there on the top of the pyramid. First, the language, in our case, English. Not enough people realize that it's our ability to use our language which will determine our place on the social pyramid, and which will also control, to a great extent, the amount of money we will earn during our lives. A person may dress in the latest fashion and present a very attractive appearance, so far so good, but the minute he or she opens his or her mouth and begins to speak, he or she proclaims to the world his or her level on our pyramid. Shaw's play Pygmalion, later adapted into the musical comedy My Fair Lady, is an extreme example of what I'm talking about. Our use of the language is the one thing we cannot hide. Many years ago, the graduating class of a large university was given an examination in English vocabulary. The test scores were graded into groups of 5% each, the top 5% and so on to the bottom. At regular intervals during the next 20 years, questionnaires were sent to the surviving graduates, asking them their occupations, incomes, and so on. Without a single exception, those who scored highest on the vocabulary test were in the top income group, while those who scored lowest were in the lowest income group. Reader's Digest published an article by Blake Clark entitled "Words Can Work Wonders for You." In it, he wrote, "Tests of more than 350,000 persons from all walks of life show that more often than any other measurable characteristic, knowledge of the exact meanings of a large number of words accompanies outstanding success." End of quote. He also mentioned the work done in this field by scientist Johnson O'Connor and gave O'Connor's best illustration of the importance of vocabulary. Tests were given to executive and supervisory personnel in 39 large manufacturing plants. The results showed that every one of the men tested rated high in the basic aptitudes that go with leadership. Differences in their vocabulary ratings, however, were definite and dramatic. Presidents and vice presidents averaged 236 out of a possible 272 points. Managers averaged 168. Superintendents, 140. Foremen, 114. Floor bosses, 86. In virtually every case, vocabulary correlated with executive level and income. Children with the best vocabularies get the best grades in school. A salesman in his 50s who was in the bottom 5% in vocabulary worked himself into the top 45% and is now vice president of his firm. An encouraging fact to keep in mind, Clark went on to say, is that when we master one word, we find that we've added several others. It's as if the new one is a nucleus of thought around which whirl numerous related ideas that we now come to understand. Deliberately learning 10 new words, we pick up probably 90 more, almost without realizing it. You see, understanding our language is the key to studying and learning everything else. Literally millions of people are being held back in life simply because they've never taken the time to learn their own language. Let's face it, from the earliest times, the favored class of people has always been the educated class. They can make themselves recognized instantly anywhere by the simple expedient of speaking a few words. Our language, more than anything else, determines the extent of our knowledge. You see, everything in all the vast storehouse of knowledge has a name, a label. These names, these words, make up the language. The more words we know and can properly use, the more knowledge we have. Of this you can be sure. A person's knowledge and his language go together. It's almost impossible for one to be larger than the other. Before we move to the second point, which is knowledge in your field of general interest. Make it a point to acquire books that will help you improve your vocabulary. You'll find them valuable additions to your library and an enormous help in your career. In addition to vocabulary, effective English usage is important. This entails learning the parts of speech, what they mean, how they should be used to construct sentences. This, too, is a reflection of your present knowledge. Right now, mentally rate yourself on your use of the language. Would you say your rating would be excellent, good, fair, or poor? If you rated yourself excellent, you're in the top 1/10 of 1% of the population. If you said good, you're definitely in the top 5%. If you rated yourself fair, get a good book on English at your bookstore and study it. And if you rated yourself as poor, take a home study or night course in English. Many excellent courses are available. Impress on your youngsters the importance of knowing their language, the importance of speech. More people speak English now than any other language on the planet, with the possible exception of Chinese. English literature, from Chaucer to Eliot, from Shakespeare to Hemingway, is the richest and most extensive on earth. So when you're studying English, you're studying one of the world's greatest and most interesting subjects. If you think you don't have time to study, listen to what Louis Shores has to say about this. He said, each of us must find his own 15-minute period each day for reading. It's better if it's regular. The only requirement is the will to read. With it, you can find 15 minutes no matter how busy the day. That means you'll read half a book a week, 2 books a month, 20 a year, and 1,000 in a reading lifetime. It's an easy way to become well-read, and it takes just 15 minutes a day. Now let's get to our second area of study, our general interest. Everyone has something in which he or she is interested more than in other subjects. This is true of the salesperson, doctor, architect, executive, or student. Reading in this area is for profit, and we should read for pleasure as well. Once we have a regular program going along to improve our knowledge of our language, we should begin a systematic study of the field which interests us most and which will help us reach our goal just that much sooner. I received a letter from one of my radio listeners, a woman, saying it was her ambition to write poetry. There was a telephone number on her letter, so I called her. I asked her how long she'd been studying poetry and what kind of a collection of published poetry she had. She told me she didn't have a single book on poetry and had never read it as a study. I mention this because it's so often the case. People will say they want to do a particular thing, but a bit of questioning quickly reveals that it's a whim, not a real and important goal. If we're interested in boating, we subscribe to boating magazines and usually have a collection of books on boating, Stories of the Sea, a collection of the works of Conrad, and we usually know, down to the bilge pumps and mooring lines, exactly the kind of boat we want. I know because I have such a collection. I also have a wonderful collection of books on English, including poetry, great fiction, the great books, several excellent dictionaries, and a number of books on writing and style and mistakes to avoid. Our company has published on tape cassette one of the finest programs on vocabulary building ever put together, and you can listen to it and repeat the words as you drive your car. Other motorists might think you're a bit batty, but you'll be learning in the best way possible by listening and repeating a fine vocabulary of the English language. Most languages can number their words under 200,000. The English language has more than 600,000 and is still growing every day. None of us can learn them all, although professors of English come very close. Incidentally, the number 2 person in the country in the use of his language is the corporation president, and that's no accident. Our ability to translate our thoughts and ideas into words in a powerful and effective way is inextricably linked to our growth in the world of business or any other organization. In addition to English, each of us should have a good working knowledge of world history, and especially the history of our own country and the history of the idea of human freedom. Millions of Americans don't know how truly fortunate they are to be able to openly criticize their government and its leaders, to be able to bring suit against public officials, to call an attorney of their choice in case of arrest and be judged by a jury of their peers. Did you know that as far as is known, there has never been a sentence of innocent in the Soviet court? If you go to trial in Russia, believe me, you're guilty, and you're going to prison or a work camp. In hundreds of countries, you could be subjected to torture without recourse. My wife and I were talking to a couple in South Africa some years ago, a white couple, and they said to us with feeling, "My God, when the plane lands in the United States, you can smell the freedom." Most Americans, believe it or not, don't know anything about the idea of personal liberty, nor how difficult it was to come by, nor how precious it is, nor do they have the foggiest notion of their true options and opportunities. I think a good personal library is essential. It should contain good books and a dozen or so excellent tape cassette programs. The tape cassette is the greatest idea for learning since the invention of the printing press. It's effortless, yet so effective. When you listen to the human voice, you're learning the way you learned most of what you know. It's the most natural way to learn. And while a book is often read only once, tape cassettes can be listened to over and over again, months and years later. And perhaps most importantly, they can be listened to while doing other things, while dressing in the morning, while driving the car, while having a snack or at the dinner table, so that the entire family can soak up some information. Those without a good library, and they don't even build bookshelves in American homes anymore, unless they're specified by an architect, they're seriously handicapped. They miss so much of the fun, the joy of learning the things we want to learn. Books and cassettes are not an expense item. They're an investment, and as far as we know, the best investment on earth. They pay us dividends out of all proportion to their small cost, and not just in pleasure and knowledge, but in cash, in income. As someone has written, books extend our narrow present back into the limitless past. They show us the mistakes of the men and women before us, and share with us recipes for human success. There's nothing to be done which books, and let me add tape cassettes, will not help us do much better. To try to live without constantly expanding our knowledge is to close our eyes not just to the whole purpose of life, but to the facts of life as well. Never before has the world moved so rapidly as it's moving today. We must make up our minds to move with it, to stay up with it, to grow and prosper with it, or just fall by the wayside. Not just because it's the best way to our goals, but because it's the way to really enjoy living, as the skillful sailor enjoys the sea. So often a person will live in the shallows from force of habit, or because those around him are wasting their time without realizing that only a thin screen of reeds separates him from the fine deep ocean beyond. He or she can sail to any chosen port, if the time's been taken and the effort expended to build a good boat. Now let me make an important point. The person who knows where he or she is going and who's made up his or her mind to get there is going to make the grade regardless of education. If an education is necessary to the accomplishment of the goal, well, he or she will get it. Nothing in the world can take the place of persistence and determination. I think it's important to succeed in every department of our lives, and becoming well-educated is one of the most vital. What good is a large material success if a person has remained too ignorant to enjoy it or to administer it? Now let's recap. Knowledge is power. The more our knowledge, the more power we can exercise over our lives and our futures. Think of human society as a pyramid composed of layers beginning with the broad base and narrowing to a pinnacle at the top. Pick the place on the pyramid you're going to shoot for and start climbing. Since there's far too much knowledge for any one person to assimilate, where can we start? First, with our language, and next, with our general area of interest. Two subjects which can keep us growing and interested for the rest of our lives. Remember that our language is the one thing we cannot hide except by silence. Let's bring it up to the point where it can do the job for us we want it to do. To a surprising extent, our ability to use our language and the extent of our vocabulary will determine our income and our future. Use our excellent cassette programs in vocabulary building, and spend at least 15 minutes every day reading something, not only interesting, but calculated to stretch your mind a little more. Remember that a mind stretched by a new idea can never again return to its original dimensions. It's estimated that the average person adds only 5 new words a year to his or her vocabulary. That's not nearly enough for this day and age. We should add that many a week. Many popular magazines publish features which will help you in this area. And finally, realize that graduating from school is just the beginning, the commencement of our days and years of learning. For with wisdom will come kindness and patience, love, understanding, and success as a person. It's never too late to begin.